It is not lost on me that when you were the House Speaker, you allowed the legislature to defund our schools and giveaways for the profit education industry, and we don't have the funding to reopen the schools safely. Are you prepared to have a memorial page for dead students and dead teachers in the upcoming yearbook? If the answer is no, then we cannot safely reopen schools.
Tonight, Jessica Harrington urged school board members to reconsider online-only education.
I love my children, I love my coworkers, and I love being at the brick and mortar school and in-person learning, but I love them being alive more.
Teacher told the State Board of Education that students will die and teachers will die if they go back to class now.
Good evening, Jen and Keith. There actually wasn't a lot of opportunity for the public or teachers to address the State Board of Education today, but one teacher did manage to stand up and say what a lot of teachers are thinking right now.
In a mostly empty auditorium at Strawberry Crest High School, middle school teacher Jessica Harrington managed to get 2 minutes of time to address the State Board of Education.
Children do get this virus, and children will have died, and they will die.
She lashed out at them for mandating Florida schools reopen for students.
What is the acceptable number of children and teachers and staff that will die when we reopen our schools?
Outside, Harrington told 8 on Your Side she believes the State Board of Education should be held accountable.
But as soon as one teacher dies or one child dies, it's going to be on them.
Please like and subscribe to our channel, Fire Breathing Rob. We interview amazing people that do amazing things all over the country and even all over the world. We've kind of extended out. So thanks for that. This is Jessica Harrington, and she is running for Florida House District 64. And I believe, Jessica, you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is in Northwest Tampa, that area?
Yep, so we are part of Northwest Hillsborough County and Northeast Pinellas County. So we go into 2 counties, but if I just say Tampa or the Tampa Bay area, most people know where that is.
Well, Jessica, thanks so much for coming on the program. Really appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor for sure. Anybody that's a friend of Anna Eskamani is a friend of mine.
So for the people that don't live in Florida, can you tell the viewers a little bit about you and why you're running for House District 64 here in the great state of Florida?
Sure. So, I grew up here in Florida. My parents come from Pennsylvania. And when they moved down here, obviously, the weather is it's a lot better here. But they came down, my dad's actually a bricklayer and came down here looking for work. And so, education was a big part of our household growing up because neither of my parents went to college. So, they had me and my brother very young. And so when I got into the University of Florida and went to school, it was really hard for a family like mine, middle-class working family, to be able to afford college. And to me, something wasn't really right about that. Like, how is it that in a country as great as ours, we make it difficult for, basic things like, being able to afford college and being able to work for a better life. So my parents ended up actually, taking out a second mortgage on their home just to put me through college. And then when I graduated, that was when the 2008 recession hit. And my family, my father lost his bricklaying job, and my family had to declare bankruptcy. And all of that so that I could have an outstanding education, that meant a lot to me. So I ended up becoming a teacher. I went into the education field because I felt like it was so important in my household, and I wanted to make sure that other families out there also had the opportunity to send their children to really good schools and have really good teachers. But after 12, this is my 13th year going into teaching, after seeing what is happening with our state legislature when it comes to working families, when it comes to education and healthcare, something has to be done. And the problem is, no matter what side of the aisle you are on, it feels that both parties can sometimes be in this cycle of just taking control from each other and not really doing what's best for working people and working families. So when I think of a progressive, I don't think of someone that is, extreme or doing things that people don't want. I think that they label people in a negative way, but really progressives are the people that have gotten things done for the past 200 years in our country, right? You know, so back with the actual progressive movement and the labor movement, and the things that we're doing today really defines what working families need today. We need livable wages. We need jobs that are dignified, that are going to help us feed our families. We want good education. We want health care as a right, you know, not as a perk of employment. So all of these things are what I'm fighting for. It's the reason I'm running. It's time for a new generation of leaders in this state and in this country. And we need young people to step up and take the, you know, run for these seats and win these seats.
So this is Jessica Harrington, and she is running for Florida House District 64 here on Fire Breathing Rob. The Grant family's been in politics for a long, long time, many, many years.
I wish I could have brought a picture of like how old I was when that family first got into it. I was 5 years old. Let's just put it that way.
It's crazy, and knowing about this, and he's been pretty bad for the state, to be honest. And I know you can extend on this, you know, what he's done and the bills that he's put his name on. And we'll talk about Amendment 4 and how he was a part of the poll tax issue, along with the rest of the Republican Party for that matter. But before we even get into that, how do you expect to defeat such a Florida dynasty like the Grant family?
Yeah, so that's a great question. That's probably something that people ask me all the time. Like, how do you expect that you're going to be able to take down a name that is so well known in our district? And what I would say is look at what's been happening over the past 4 years. I mean, we've seen, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York take down one of the most powerful Democrats. We just saw Cori Bush out in Missouri just defeated Lacey Clay. So we know that it's possible. We know that the powers that be and the names that have been there for so long, it's only a matter of time. And the way we take down the people that are really just coasting is what I say. They're in office and they don't really have to do much, and they just expect that they'll get the votes because maybe they have an R next to their name or they're in a very safe district. And that time is over. You know, we are here to make sure that every candidate, no matter how long you've been there, works for their constituents and holds town halls and gives information. And we have seen that Jamie Grant has not done that. You know, as soon as he left law school in 2009, he became a lawmaker the year after. So his whole life, he has been groomed for this. And the proof is in the pudding. I mean, you know, his own father, you know, on a comment on some kind of post was, you know, we said, we know how to breed them. And it's like, okay, so you're telling us that you've groomed your son to take over after you, and this is just what he's meant to do. So, you know, I'll tell you what other countries have leaders like that, and that's, you know, North Korea. That's places like, you know, when our country first started, we have monarchies. I mean, this is not supposed to be an oligarchy. This is not a dictatorship. And for him to say, oh, well, people vote for me. Well, you know what? People aren't really voting for you. They're voting because of the R next to your name. If they really knew what you're like and what kind of policies you're for, they wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot stick, you know? So it's our job now to educate the community about what kind of person Jamie Grant is and what kind of lawmaker he is, because he's not for the people.
To just keep going into the questions that, you know, kind of telling people who you are, what inspired you to run?
So, I mean, I'll be honest, like it really was my students. It's, you know, I started teaching at a time where all I've known is, you know, public schools that have been cut with funding. So when I first got into education, right after graduating college, again, like I said before, it was right when the recession hit. And one of the biggest places in the budget that was cut was in education. So I've never known what a fully funded classroom looks like. I've never known what it is like to not have to buy your own school supplies. I've always had to do that. And so I think that, I think so many people don't really understand what's really happening with our public schools and when it comes to the funding. And, you know, it sounds really good when you talk about school choice and you talk about these vouchers that parents can get to send their child to any school. On the surface level, that sounds amazing. Like, who doesn't want to be able to send their kid to the best school ever? But what we're not realizing is that when you pull the surface, you know, you kind of dig a little deeper, you're realizing that this money that is being spent for these voucher programs is not in conjunction with, it is at the expense of. So it has to be taking from one place and giving to another. And to me, that is resegregation it's resegregating our schools. It's creating a place of schools that have and have not. And this is detrimental to our students. The one thing it says in the Florida Constitution is we have to have a robust, public education for every student. And right now that is not happening. We are not spending what we should be spending in our public schools.
Every student learns differently, and I don't understand why these morons basically up in Tallahassee think that they can make some one-size-fits-all education curriculum for kids that learn in all kinds of different ways. So as a person that's a teacher, what do you think about all these tests and this one-size-fits-all curriculum that basically they're trying to push because they're getting money off these systems through campaign finance donations?
Yep, you just hit it on the head there. Really, these testing companies, it's about money, and the more tests they can throw at our kids, the more money they're going to make. And it's funny because when we get to our classrooms, they talk so much about differentiated instruction. They talk about making sure that you are reaching every kid and you're teaching in different ways. But then at the end of the year, like you said, then it's a one-size-fits-all test, and it makes no sense. So, I mean, I do believe that we need to stop the over-testing. I know that we have tests that we have to give, and that's understandable. But I'll give you an example. So, we have something called the FSA. So
Yes.
the FSA math to FSA reading. So why does a kid have to take the FSA math test in, let's say, April or March or April, and then they have to turn around and they have to take another district exam, math exam, a month later? So these are two major tests on these kids. And so to me, that just doesn't make sense. We're over testing them, and it has to do with money. So we need to figure out which tests are the most important, but we also need to make sure that, we know that a kid's score is not the whole story. When I was in school, I was not the best test taker.
Right.
And, but I was able to, I did well when I went to college, and I was able to succeed. So I don't think that's the best indicator. We have to look at the child holistically. And I'm all for, making portfolios or letting kids show what they know in other ways. It doesn't have to be this, the standard, fill in A, B, C, or D. Like, it just does not make sense. And we need to end the over testing of our children.
So my thing is there a lot of bureaucracy as far as holding you guys back as teachers to make that kind of curriculum that, is innovative to the students' needs?
Yeah, so it's funny you mention that, because our district, for example, I'm sure many districts are like this, is they give us a set, standards, which I think that's fine to have standards. But sometimes, like, you feel like you really are just teaching to the test. And then you go and look at these, like, charter schools, these private schools that are taking our money. And it's like the state is totally hands off. They're like, let's let them be innovative, and let's let them. So it's like you wonder, even though they're also being funded by the government in some cases, but you're so hands off, and then you're saying that they're so much greater. Why are we not given that same kind of freedom? And it's simple. It's because they want to have control of us. And then when we fail, they can say, oh, well, look, these are failing schools, and we need to take funding away, and we need to have the state take them over. So they really do they don't really let us, have these innovative ideas. And I think that if they did that, because again, we do know our students better, I think that would really help with what you're talking about there. So yeah, we don't have the freedom that we should have as professionals. I mean,
Who do you respect or like in Florida government? Somebody that you may want to work with, whether it's maybe somebody on the other side of the aisle or somebody that is in the Democratic Party?
yeah, so I mean, I definitely have a whole hell of a lot of respect for a lot of our state lawmakers that are on the Democratic side, because again, being in the minority party, they don't always get their way. They don't always get the bills. They can't always stop bad bills. What they can do is try to make really bad bills a little less bad. So that's why it is so important that we flip more of these seats. And I will give a shout out to Senator Tom Lee. I know he's retiring from the legislature, but he's a Republican, and he actually, he actually is someone that worked across the aisle with, he was for background checks. He also talked about education. He was like, are we the committee on education, or are we the committee on charter schools? Because, he actually said that, and I could not believe it. It was so amazing to see someone, really stand up to their own party and say, you know what, why do we focus so much on 10% of our students when the other 90% go to public schools? So, we need to see more lawmakers like that are willing to work across the aisle. Of course, Representative Escamani, Fentress Driscoll, Jennifer Webb, people in my area, I would be so honored to be able to work with them. But I'll tell you what, this next class that's coming up, like we thought the 2018 class was so great, they're amazing. But I'm going to tell you, there are some amazing, amazing candidates that are in this 2020 first-time candidates, never have won elections. And if some of these candidates win, I mean, they are going to bring it to Tallahassee. And I'm talking about, Michelle Rayner down in District 70. We have Javier Estevez down in South Florida. We have Angie Nixon, and we have, Jasmine Shaw Rogers. I mean, so there's some amazing just people running for office. And I would be so honored to be part of that class and to be able to work with them. And it's really going to be like the squad, like the new squad here in Florida.
Jessica Harrington here, and she is a teacher, as it says right on her background, running for House District 64 here in the state of Florida. What are the constituents telling you in your district as far as the most important issues to them?
Yeah, so in District 64, we are pretty fortunate that there are many, many, many families that are pretty, wealthy and kind of well off in this district. So there's a lot of people in my district that are not really feeling the brunt of what a lot of people are feeling. And then there's a whole nother side of our district where people are, sitting on the poverty line and not doing so well. So it's my job to kind of convince, 75% of my district who are doing well to help others and to think about the people across the state that are not. So again, when you're a lawmaker in Florida, you may represent one district of 170,000 people or whatever it may be, but you are making laws that are for the entire state, all 22 million Floridians. So the things I've heard, our number one issue that has been consistent is healthcare. There are many folks that, they cannot believe that we have not expanded Medicaid to 800,000 Floridians. I mean, that's just free money it's not free. This is our taxes. That's our tax dollars on the table that has been dedicated to being able to expand Medicaid, and we have not accepted it because of it's a political game. And now we see states like Missouri that have expanded Medicaid.
Right.
And was it Mississippi too? I don't know who, but
Oklahoma and Missouri. You're right.
Okay. And
Right.
it's like, and then when you see states like this that are accepting these dollars and expanding, you can see that, where Florida's priorities lie. And it's not with healthcare, it's not with people, and with this unemployment system, it's just as bad. We do have a lot of small businesses here in our district and in Florida that are struggling and that have had to close down. So when you have a governor and you have a legislature that have no problem giving $500 million tax breaks to the largest corporations, nothing for our small businesses, that is a problem. And, Jamie Grant was actually in office in 2010 when that unemployment bill was signed into law by Rick Scott. So not many lawmakers that are still around that were there then are still around now, but Jamie Grant is. He voted to lower the amount of money people can get down to $275, and that, who can live on $275? Like, I mean, that's unconscionable to think that that's what they offer to people. And the system, the failure of the system, I know Rep. Escamani talked about this a lot. It was meant and designed to fail. It was designed for people to get frustrated and to give up on it so that our unemployment numbers would look like they are, a lot lower than they actually were.
If you do win this district, which we hope you do, Jessica, what 3 issues would you want to work on if elected to the Florida House?
So that's a great question. So definitely, we're definitely going to have to get up there and work on education issues because, again, as a teacher, and that's what thousands and thousands of teachers in the state are relying on us to get up there to make sure that we are fully funding our schools, that we have a decade of progress, that we commit to funding our schools, and then we stop the bleeding with these voucher programs. So education, of course. I would have to say we have to work on the environment. I mean, I know that when there's a crisis happening, as the global pandemic, healthcare, jobs and economy, Black Lives Matter and the racial injustice happening. We need to still remember that none of that matters if we're underwater. We need to make sure that we talk about environmental justice as well, because when hurricanes hit, when sea level rises, it's going to be our Black and brown folks and our poorest citizens.
Well, look
that
at
are gonna be the
Miami,
most affected.
Jessica. If you get a heavy rainstorm in Miami, it's a flood.
Yeah, and so we have to look at those issues. And another issue that I think wasn't really on my radar in 2018. I mean, it's always been on my radar, but it wasn't a cornerstone of our campaign, is really prison reform and criminal justice reform. So we have a crisis happening in our prison system right now, and it's not being talked about enough. We have, we're talking about police brutality in the streets. We are not understanding that right behind the doors of these prisons, we have brutality happening, and no one's seeing this. It's not caught on tape. Just a few months ago, actually maybe 2 months ago, maybe less, there was a prisoner. His name was Christopher Howell, and he was pretty much a whistleblower. He tried to let someone know about the corruption that was happening, and he was murdered by a correctional officer who used a blunt force on him, or not blunt, but traumatic force on him. He ended up dying from his injuries, and he was in prison for, I believe, I think it was cell phone, he stole some cell phone chargers, and he had some mental health issues that I think need to be addressed. He ends up paying with his life. And so one thing that we are asking for every correctional officer to have body cameras as well. If we're going to ask our police officers to do that, I think we need our correctional officers to also have body cameras, and we need to make sure, there's prisons that don't even have air conditioning. Living here in Florida, you have to think about how awful it is, in the heat inside, and then you're putting people, so they're really not treating the people that are being locked up. These are our families, these are our brothers, our sisters, our mothers and fathers, and we are not treating them with human dignity. So that's one thing we really need to work on, and that's something I'm committed to working on, especially my opponent. He's the chair of the Criminal Justice Subcommittee, wouldn't hear any criminal justice reform bills. So we need to send him packing so we can actually start working on these issues.
Geez, that's not even humane. I thought to have no air conditioning.
Yeah, and when my opponent, he takes money from the largest private prison, one of the largest private prisons, the GEO group, and that's the same group that was separating, women from and children at the border, and holding them in camps. And so, and Congress did an investigation on GEO group properties and the human rights abuses that are happening. So for you to be able to accept campaign contributions to a company, from a company that has had human rights abuses, that tells me where your priorities lie, and it's not with humanity.
But can you give the viewers that don't live in the state of Florida a little bit of a lowdown of what the heck is going on with Amendment 4 right now?
Yeah, so Amendment 4, so back, like you said before, in 2018, over 66% of Floridians voted to restore the voting rights of returning citizens. So returning citizens are people that have done time in prison, and now they're getting back to society and giving them the right to vote. So Florida was one of a handful of states that once you committed a crime as a felony, you lost your right to vote forever unless the governor granted you your right to vote back. So again, voter suppression at its finest. We decided to pass this amendment, and in 2018 it passed. So fast forward to 2019 and 2020 session, my opponent decided that he was going to write a bill to define what the terms of completion of your sentence actually meant. So when we all voted on it, we believed, they finished their time, they finished their term of their sentence, and then they're done. They decided that it also meant that whatever fees and fines and restitution or anything that was tacked on as not really part of the judge's sentence, but just fees associated with it, would have to be paid off first. And we all know that having to pay money in order to vote, that's unconstitutional. It's against the 24th Amendment, actually, and that's a poll tax. So we have been fighting really hard to overturn that bill. When I'm in office, I will make sure that we are writing legislation that just gets rid of that language altogether. And we say that the day that you walk out of prison, you're eligible to vote. So right now, it's in the limbo right now because the governor, we had Judge Hinkle. He is in the federal courts that he agreed it was a poll tax. Governor DeSantis decided he didn't like that answer, and he ended up trying to get it overturned, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court pretty much said, we're not going to touch this right now because it's too close to the election. So right now it's still in limbo, and these Amendment 4 people are not going to be able to vote in this most important election now because of this.
This is Jessica Harrington, and she is running for House District 64, which is Northwest Tampa and in Hillsborough County. Jessica, so what's your opinion on Hillsborough County? Now, there was that plan to reopen and only go online for the first month. That's been canceled by Richard Corcoran, and I guess the governor had power over that. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But, the FDA is challenging this in court now. So what's your opinion? What's going to go down right now? And you know what? The teachers should go on strike. They should say to basically the governor and Richard Corcoran, screw you. We're going to go on strike.
Yeah, I wish we could do that because, I think it's a very powerful way to come together and to have our voices be heard and not be taken advantage of. But unfortunately, when you have a Republican legislature for the past 25 years. The Florida, teachers have not gone on strike since 1968, I believe.
Oh, wow.
And that's because of the laws that have been put in place that says that if a teacher goes on strike, that they can lose everything. They can lose their certificate, they can lose their job, they can lose their pension that they've worked for, their retirement. So pretty much they have made it where they've backed teachers into a corner, and they say, you know what, we know that you'll never be able to go on strike because you'll lose it all. And that means that we can treat you any way we want because there's nothing you can do about it. If you don't like it, you can quit. So we are striking in Florida. Unfortunately, it's called a silent strike, where teachers are resigning and quitting and retiring early because of the laws in place. But again, Hillsborough County, I think we were duped a little bit because a couple weeks ago when the Hillsborough County School Board put the plan in place for doing a mixed, half of the kids going into the schools and half online learning, we were under the impression that we could change that plan, that we submitted it to the governor, and that after a few weeks of listening to doctors, we could come back and change that plan. That is what every school board member was told. That is what all of the teachers were told. Now, come to find out, when we tried to do that, we tried just a few days ago when we voted to start with the online learning. Now we have been told by the governor and by Corcoran, nope, that plan is the plan that you gave us, and that's the plan you have to follow, and you can't change it. So we were totally duped. If we would have known that, we would have forced them to vote no on that plan weeks ago and come up with a new plan. So right now, they are not listening to the doctors, and we're at the point where we are hoping that the Florida Education Association, that their lawsuit, works before 2 weeks comes when we have to open the schools, because that lawsuit that they're filing is not about putting schools online. That lawsuit is just about giving the local school boards the control back. So if that wins, then that means Hillsborough County can make their own decision and we can go to the online learning first. So that's what we're our fingers are crossed.
So can you speak about the courage to speak up to Richard Corcoran, who was extremely bad when I believe he was a state senator, was he before?
Yeah, he was the Speaker of the House.
Speaker of the House, sorry, yeah.
Yep. So we, I found out, just probably a month ago, that the Florida Department of Education was going to finally be holding their first in-person meeting since the pandemic started. I think it was a ploy to kind of trick people into thinking, well, look, we're going to meet in person. It's safe. So lo and behold, they are coming to Hillsborough County. And I was like, I cannot just let this go by. So I decided I was going to show up to this meeting. I was actually really surprised that there wasn't a packed auditorium, but, social distance. But there was not a lot of people there. And I kind of asked, I was like, why is no one here speaking out about this? And they're like, well, it's not on the agenda. So they didn't put anything about school reopening comments on the agenda. So you can't speak about that. I was like, okay, well, what can I speak about? Well, anything that's on the agenda. So I decided to pick something, and I just picked testing. And it literally had nothing to do with what I thought it was. It was like, are they going to extend not testing? It was something really obscure. So I just decided, okay, I'm going to pretend to speak on that. So I kind of get up to the podium, I start talking about testing, not even really realize what I'm talking about. I'm just like, yeah, we should not test people this year because the pandemic's still going on. And then I kind of flipped the script. I kind of stopped and I was like, now we're going to talk about school reopening, and it's not safe, and people are going to die, and blood's going to be on your hands. And I was like, and Richard Corcoran, when you were the House Speaker, you voted to defund our schools, and now they don't even have the money to open safely. So it really was a bold, move, but I felt like it needed to be done. And I really felt like I was speaking up for all the teachers across the state that day because no other teachers had the chance to speak.
So what was their response? I saw the clips, but what was the response? Was it just speechlessness?
Literally didn't even, they just like kind of stared and they listened. And then as soon as I was done speaking, because I only had 2 minutes, like some people had made this comment, they just went back to business as usual as if I never had been there. I could not believe it. It was so funny. I was like, wow, like they just went right along with their business. And so, what are you going to do? I mean, it's really sad. And it just shows you that, they value the economy and they value money and they value, more than they value human life. And we are, teachers have gone through hell. They, with the active shooter drills, we are willing to put ourselves at risk for children every day. But now you're asking us to stand in front of a train that we can see is coming, and so that's what we're asking. We're saying, listen, what says that a kid has to graduate when they're 18 years old? What says that a kid has to, there's other ways that we can educate children during this pandemic. This is a 1 in 100-year pandemic, and we can't just go on with business as usual. This is going to be a learning experience for everyone. And we need to think of creative solutions to these problems, because right now, just putting people in a building and we've already, the epidemiologists, the doctors have said, don't open your schools. It's too dangerous. So we need to be listening to the experts. This is a health issue, a public health crisis. This is not an education crisis, but they are trying to pin it on the schools to solve the problems, and we're not going to be able to do that. A few months ago, back in April and March and May, we had so many parents singing our praises, like, oh my gosh, teachers, they are so amazing. How do they put up with my 2 kids, and 100 other kids, oh, we love them so much, make sure we pay them this and that. And then we come to August, and I can't tell you how many, I've gotten 90% of my messages I get from people are positive and they like what we're doing. But I'm going to tell you, we get so many messages of people calling us lazy, saying that we are, that nurses and doctors have been essential workers on the front line, and why aren't we going back? Why are we so scared? Get back to work. You shouldn't get paid if you're not. And I just can't believe it. And really, they not understanding that when we talk about essential workers, yes, of course, education is essential. But if we decide to open our schools and have more cases explode, we are not only putting our families and our children at risk, now we are putting our nurses and doctors at greater risk. They are already dealing with an overwhelmed system, and now we want to overwhelm it more. Doctors and nurses have gotten this and have died from this. Public employees that are working, grocery store workers have gotten this. So why are we going to, build more cases by opening our schools? And it's ridiculous to me that people would tell me, you can be if you can go grocery shopping, you can go to school and be in a classroom. It's not the same. It's not.
You don't go grocery shopping for 8 hours or 7 hours. It's a joke, but these people they don't get it. They're in a different planet. My thing is, what's going to happen with the kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade? When the kids are in there, they want to hug each other. You tell them you can't do that. Or when these kids play with the mask and they push it down. Or you even got the older kids, maybe in high school, that say, basically, screw you, I'm not going to wear the mask all day. And when you turn your back, they take the mask off. And I want to bring this up too. We just saw a teacher in Tampa at, I think it was Pierce Elementary or Pierce Middle School. I don't know if you saw this. Yeah. This was just in the Tampa Bay Times. I think it was on August 5th, that he went for a workshop there to get ready to start school and do the teacher meetings. And he's got coronavirus now. So, and that's a teacher. So again, what's going to happen when you flood these kids into the schools? And you're going to have kids die. You're going to have adults die. It's just, it's crazy, and we're
I
already
mean, they're going to
seeing
end up
this.
shutting down again. I mean,
Yeah.
that's going to be they're going to open and then they'll be able to say to the parents that are, I mean, because there are parents out there that are that want us to open as well. They believe it's safe. These might be parents that don't believe in masks. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then when they end up closing down again, at least they'll be able to say to the parents, oh, well, see, we did try to open, we just couldn't. But the difference is not taking that leadership now, like you said, we're going to be losing lives first, and that can be prevented and avoided. I don't think we need to open just to prove that it's not safe. You know, like I just don't understand if the epidemiologists and doctors say it's not safe, we need to listen to them. Why do we need to lose some life first? And a lot of our students we know also live in multi-generational households where they have grandparents at home that absolutely cannot be exposed to this virus. And so we are pretty much giving them a death sentence by letting the kids come back to our schools.
And there's no leadership, period, from the governor or anybody in his administration that wants it. He just
Mask
follows
order.
Trump's lead. Say again?
Yeah. That's all they need is a mask order. I mean, not all they
Yeah.
need, but one big step the governor can take is a statewide mask order.
Yeah.
Start there. Let people know that this is serious. But when you don't put a mask order on and you're not wearing a mask and Trump's not wearing a mask and all these people, you're sending that message that this is not a big deal. And that is what scares me.
We're seeing new teachers now getting, the same amount of money as teachers that have been in the system for 8, 9, 10 years. I mean, it sounds crazy. What do you think about this pay raise by Governor DeSantis?
Yeah, so, when he proclaimed that 2020 was going to be the year of the teacher, we were excited. We were like, hey, what is this going to look like? And, and then for him to say, it's only going to be for new teachers. I mean, for personal experience, I can tell you, this is my 13th year going into teaching, 13 years teaching. I just last year made $47,500. So when I first started teaching, $47,000 would have been life-changing. But that would be, 13 years ago, that would have been life-changing money. I would have been able to pay my student loans back. That would have been great. So these new teachers coming in, now it seems that, 47 doesn't seem like a lot of money, now with inflation, but for a new teacher to come in and make the same as a 13-year experienced teacher, that is just really, that's really bad for teacher morale.
Right.
We don't feel valued. We don't feel that our job is taken seriously and that people care. And so when you make laws like that, it really, I think it's going to be really hard, and more teachers are going to leave the profession, and we're not going to attract as many new teachers in the profession. So I think what we need to do is we need to, whatever we bumped up the new teacher raise, we need to bump that up for everyone. So if it was $10,000 get there, everyone deserves a $10,000 raise. And we also have to talk about all of the other workers, right? Our bus drivers, our janitors, our kitchen staff, they aren't making a living. They're living in poverty. And so we need to talk about overhauling the entire system and seeing that education really is essential, and they need to start paying us that way. And then of course, we need technology in our schools. We need supplies. We shouldn't have to I spend at least $500 a year, if not more, on school supplies every year. And I don't think that's the way it should be. I don't see doctors having to walk into hospitals and buy their own supplies. Why should a teacher have to do that? So we need, just across the board, we need to invest in our schools.
Wow, that's crazy. I knew that teachers did that, but $500 is a heck of a lot of money if you're only making $47,000. That's pretty disgusting.
And Florida started the school year with 3,500 vacancies last year.
Yes.
And I'm guessing that it's going to be even more this year because of the pandemic. So if you take 3,500 and you multiply that, let's say a class of 18, how many thousands of kids are not getting a quality, highly certified teacher in front of them? And it says it only takes 1 year of a kid having a bad teacher or not an experienced teacher giving them poor instruction for them to fall behind, fall really behind their peers. So we need to make sure that, we pay people to come into this profession, we pay them well, and we make it, so that they want to stay.
Well, now you are a civics teacher, correct?
Yes.
How do you get to the kids as a civics teacher?
So it is like, I know you mentioned this when we first started talking today.
Sure
You talked
thing.
about how you're a learner that really is like, hands-on. You like to be able to, kind of get involved. You can't just have someone talking to you or writing. So what we do is we try to make it, it's like, we try to get them involved. So I'm going to just give you a couple of examples of things we do. So there's one standard where we have to teach the amendments, okay? So we have so many different ways we can engage the kids, whether it be through art, whether it be through music. I actually have this basketball that I write all the amendments on the ball, and then we'll play basketball and we'll throw the ball around, and whatever your thumb lands on, then you have to tell us what that freedom is, that amendment is. And we tell the kids, we're like, listen, like, this is real life. If you get pulled over by a cop, you better know what your constitutional rights are. And we try to make it kind of real for them, and we do scenarios, and we do all kinds of things, and that we show different videos. There's this one video I show. It's called 12 Angry Men. I don't know. Have you ever seen it?
Yes, for
Okay.
sure.
So again, so it's that's like a 1950s like black and white movie. How are kids going to be like? How are they going to like that? Well, what we do to make it like to build up to it, we actually have a mock trial. So we get to have a judge, we have lawyers, we have the bad guys, the good guys, and they all have a script, and they do it, and they act out the entire trial. And we transform the whole class into a courtroom, and the kids love it. And then the next day they all have jury duty, and they're like, oh man, and I don't tell them what the outcome, because usually we use a real case. And I never tell them what the outcome of the case is. I say, you got to get it. You got to say who was guilty and not guilty. And so they really work hard to try to put all the evidence together, and then they take a vote as a class at the end, and then I will tell them, okay, you got it or you didn't. And then we watch that movie 12 Angry Men, and I tell these kids, I'm like, listen, you got to be like that juror number 8, because all these other guys were ready to send him off to the death penalty. So if you ever get jury duty, you need to be the one asking questions. And they get so into it, and they're like, oh my gosh. And by the end of it, they're like, oh my gosh, Ms. Harrington, like, you just taught me so much about like what it's like to be in a courtroom and to have jury duty. And if I ever get jury duty, I promise I'm going to take it seriously, and I'm going to make sure I look at all the evidence. Like, they really get excited. So you just have to bring them into it,
Jessica, that's amazing that you made that all up and stuff like that. I think that's great. You must be really an amazing teacher. So I appreciate that. As we end the interview, Jessica, can you just tell the viewers where they can find more about you, how they can help you out, where they can donate, if you need anything in general, just so we can kind of get that word out?
Yes, so you can go to our website. It's really simple. It's jessicaharrington.org. Okay, that's the spelling, Harrington. So you go there, you can contribute. All the money that we raise this month is actually going to go towards all of our printing. So printing our the door hangers, our yard signs, it's everything we need. And if you want to volunteer, one positive thing about the pandemic, if there is anything, is that many people are working from home and many people are campaigning from home. So we actually have volunteers all across the country, as far away as Seattle, Washington. We have a team of volunteers that speak Spanish, and they're helping reach our Hispanic voters, and it's amazing. So anybody that feels that they want to have their little part and get involved, they can go to our website. There's a little place that says sign up to volunteer, and they can get involved and make calls for us. They can send text messages. Any way that they want to get involved, we will have something for you to do. But yeah, so jessicaharrington.org.
All right, Jessica, thanks so much for your time. And definitely, let's get a teacher in office, especially in the state of Florida. We need more teachers in political office. All right, jessicaharrington.org, and it's Florida House District 64. Jessica, thanks so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Your questions were great. You're an amazing interviewer, and I'm so excited to know you now. And thank you so much for having me on.